The Taihang Mountains rose sharply against the morning sky, their jagged ridges cut with the scars of centuries yet shrouded in mist and quiet. In the valleys below, life moved with the rhythm of the seasons. Farmers tilled terraced rice fields, water buffalo plodded slowly through streams, and children ran barefoot along dirt paths, their laughter echoing against the slopes. Smoke spiraled from chimneys, and the scent of earth and grain mingled in the air. To an outsider, the valley might have seemed untouched by war, a pocket of peace in northern China. But the villagers knew better. From distant ridges and broken towns, news travelled like fire. The Imperial Japanese Army was advancing relentlessly, sweeping villages aside, leaving ruin in its path. Linhe, a small village clinging to the mountain's base, had already witnessed the grim shadow of invasion. Families whispered about entire hamlets destroyed, crops seized, and neighbours massacred. Soldiers had trampled the fields, commandeered homes, and murdered anyone they suspected of resistance. The Japanese campaign was methodical, brutal, and unforgiving. And yet, amidst the fear, a determination stirred. Ordinary villagers, faced with overwhelming odds, resolved that they would not surrender, they would resist. And in that resolve, the seeds of a guerrilla army were sown. At the heart of this nascent resistance stood old Commander Zhao, a man whose face bore the deep lines of age and worry, yet whose eyes held a fierce glimmer of determination. He was neither a young, eager soldier, nor a strategist trained in an academy. He was a farmer, a villager, a man who had seen enough death and destruction to know what was at stake. Zhao understood that the Japanese could not be defeated in open battle. Their guns were more powerful, their numbers overwhelming, and their discipline unmatched. The only advantage the villagers had was their intimate knowledge of the land, the hidden paths, the rocky ridges, the winding valleys, and their ingenuity. Under Zhao's guidance, the villagers began to prepare. They were farmers and labourers, blacksmiths and carpenters, not professional soldiers. Yet they became warriors of a different kind, masters of traps, ambushes, and deception. Their strategy relied on asymmetrical warfare, striking fear and destruction into the enemy while minimizing their own exposure. Among the most effective weapons in their arsenal were mines, improvised, deadly, and hidden from view. These simple devices could turn a familiar field or path into a death trap, capable of stopping a patrol, crippling a convoy, or forcing the enemy to retreat in confusion. The militia studied every ridge and track with meticulous care. Mines were buried beneath carts, along narrow paths, under water tanks, even in abandoned houses. Pull wires and pressure-triggered mechanisms were concealed beneath earth and brush. Each device was a small, silent sentinel, waiting for an unsuspecting soldier. As historical records note, mines were used widely in guerrilla warfare, with Japanese forces hit by thousands, resulting in hundreds, if not over 1,000, casualties. The villagers knew that each mine planted could exact a devastating toll, and they used this knowledge to compensate for their lack of numbers and heavy weaponry. Preparation was only part of the battle. To maximize effectiveness, the militia created a network of tunnels beneath the village. These hidden passages linked houses, barns, and storage sheds, allowing fighters to move unseen, set ambushes, and escape when necessary. Lookouts were stationed along the ridges, scanning for any signs of enemy movement. Scouts ran along secret trails, delivering messages and reporting on Japanese patrols. The village itself became a fortress, not of stone or steel, but of earth, ingenuity, and courage. Every man, woman, and child had a role to play, whether directly in combat or in support, ensuring the continuity of the community and the effectiveness of their resistance. Weeks passed as the militia honed their craft. Commander Zhao drilled his men relentlessly, emphasizing coordination and timing. They rehearsed ambushes, tested detonators, and studied maps of the valley and surrounding ridges. Intelligence became as valuable as any weapon. Knowing when and where the Japanese would advance could mean the difference between life and death. Every mine, every trap, every patrol observation was recorded, and the village became a living chessboard, with each move calculated carefully to maximize damage to the enemy while minimizing risk to themselves. The tension in Linhe was constant. Even as villagers tilled their fields or tended livestock, their eyes scanned the horizon for signs of the Japanese. Every distant rumble, every dust cloud along a road set hearts racing. And then, one crisp morning, the rumble they had been waiting for arrived. Japanese trucks appeared along the narrow road leading into the valley, followed by marching soldiers in tight formation. Engineers inspected the ground ahead, confident that they could handle any threat. But they did not know the hidden dangers awaiting them. The first explosion shattered the quiet. A mine buried beneath a water tank detonated with a thunderous roar, sending splintered wood and twisted metal into the air. Japanese soldiers shouted in alarm, scrambling for cover as militia rifles cracked from concealed positions along the ridges. More mines detonated in quick succession, beneath the tracks, along the road, and even inside an abandoned cart that the enemy examined. Chaos rippled through the Japanese column. Soldiers fell, vehicles toppled, and the disciplined advance crumbled under the weight of unexpected violence. From tunnels and hidden positions, the militia struck again. Young men fired from rooftops, seasoned fighters flanked from the ridges. Commander Zhao coordinated movements with calm authority. Each attack was precise, deliberate, and synchronized with the mines. The Japanese attempted to regroup, sending engineers forward to disarm mines. But the villagers had prepared decoys and secondary traps. Each step the enemy took carried risk, and the valley itself seemed alive. When the smoke cleared, the valley was scarred but victorious. Trucks lay overturned, supplies destroyed, and Japanese casualties numbered in the hundreds. Villagers emerged cautiously from their hiding places to tend to their wounded and collect their dead. The victory, while significant, was tempered by the awareness that it was temporary. The Japanese would return, better prepared and more cautious. But the militia had proven that the combination of courage, knowledge, and ingenuity could level the playing field. In the weeks following the ambush, life in Linhe resumed a tense normality. Fields were tended, animals fed, and homes repaired. But beneath the surface, the militia prepared for the next encounter. Mines were inspected and repositioned. Tunnels were reinforced. Scouts and messengers continued to monitor enemy movements. Children carried small supplies along hidden paths. Women supported operations by providing food and clothing. Men drilled relentlessly, perfecting tactics and reinforcing their defenses. The valley itself became a living network of resistance, with every natural feature and every man-made trap contributing to the survival of the community. Commander Zhao remained vigilant. He reminded his fighters that each life mattered, yet each death could also serve the greater cause. Their resistance was not merely a series of attacks, but a statement that even in the face of overwhelming force, ordinary people could defend their homes, protect their families, and alter the course of an invader's campaign. Every mine placed, every ambush executed, was a testament to their determination, ingenuity, and unyielding spirit. By the time the Japanese attempted to advance again, the militia had become more than a group of villagers. They were the shadow of the valley, moving unseen, striking unpredictably, and disappearing before the enemy could respond. The once quiet fields and paths now held the memory of past ambushes, the echo of gunfire, and the silent promise of resistance. The Taihang Valley had become a symbol of defiance, a place where courage and strategy could challenge even the most disciplined army in the world. The days following the first ambush in Linhe were tense but filled with purpose. The villagers moved through their routines, tending fields, feeding animals, and repairing homes, yet their minds were never at ease. Every ridge, every path, every stream could conceal danger or opportunity. The guerrilla fighters became shadows themselves, moving with silent precision, their presence barely detectable, yet their impact deadly. Under Commander Zhao's guidance, the villagers were no longer mere survivors. They had become strategists, engineers, and soldiers of the earth. Mines, hidden and silent, were central to their tactics. Every mine had a story of ingenuity behind it. Some were buried beneath the thin layer of soil on paths leading into the village, triggering beneath the weight of a soldier or a cart. Others were hidden in abandoned homes, beneath water tanks, or even under the floors of empty barns. Pull wires and pressure plates were carefully camouflaged to avoid detection. Each placement was calculated to maximize impact while minimizing the risk to civilians and militia alike. Historical accounts record that Japanese forces were repeatedly caught in these traps, with thousands of casualties resulting from mines and ambushes combined. Coordination between traps and human ambushes became a deadly dance. A small squad might deliberately reveal themselves to lure enemy patrols onto a minefield, only to retreat while hidden sharpshooters struck from the ridges above. Decoys and false trails were laid to mislead the Japanese, guiding them into zones rigged with explosives. The militia became masters of timing and deception, turning even seemingly ordinary terrain into a strategic advantage. Every path, field, and bridge could be a snare, and every encounter demanded constant vigilance. Life in the village was interwoven with this web of resistance. Women carried supplies across narrow trails at night, sometimes trudging through snow or mud to deliver ammunition or food. Children ran messages between units, memorizing signals and directions to avoid leaving a trace. Blacksmiths, carpenters, and laborers repurposed their skills to construct traps, repair weapons, and reinforce hidden passages. Even elders contributed, advising on terrain and historical pathways that could be used to mislead the enemy. In this collective effort, every individual became part of the resistance, whether in combat or support. In one notable ambush, a Japanese convoy advancing along a ridge was split into separate sections, each falling into carefully hidden traps. Mines detonated beneath trucks, grenades rained down from hidden positions, and sharpshooters struck with precision. Chaos reigned, and the Japanese were forced to retreat, leaving vehicles disabled and soldiers dead or wounded. The psychological impact on the Japanese forces was profound. Their advance slowed, caution replaced confidence. Soldiers approached every path with suspicion, probing for mines, testing roads, and moving in smaller, stretched-out formations to reduce exposure. But even their meticulous preparations could not counter the ingenuity of the guerrillas. Amid these operations, personal stories of bravery emerged. Li Mei, a young woman of 16, became a courier between villages, delivering intelligence about troop movements while avoiding patrols. Her courage and agility allowed militia commanders to anticipate Japanese actions, giving them a decisive advantage in planning ambushes. Chen Wei, a blacksmith, crafted improvised detonators that synchronized multiple mines, turning narrow paths into lethal corridors. These acts of bravery were not isolated. They were repeated across the valley, each individual contributing to a larger pattern of resistance. The militia also adapted to changing conditions. In winter, snow and ice transformed the valley. Frozen streams concealed tripwires. Snowy ridges provided cover for sharpshooters. Mines were hidden beneath the snow, leaving the Japanese to navigate an unpredictable landscape. Even in harsh weather, the militia remained vigilant, using every advantage the terrain provided. By combining environmental awareness with tactical skill, they amplified their effectiveness and maintained pressure on the Japanese forces, despite limited resources. Infrastructure sabotage became another tool of resistance. Bridges were weakened and roads blocked, delaying supply lines and isolating troops. Japanese engineers struggled to clear mines and repair damage, often under ambush fire from militia fighters. Each disruption, while seemingly small, compounded the difficulties faced by the invaders. Reports indicate that thousands of Japanese troops were killed or wounded due to a combination of mines, ambushes, and disrupted supply routes. The valley's defenders turned ordinary elements, roads, bridges, fields, into instruments of warfare. Despite the danger, daily life persisted. Children attended makeshift classes in shifts to avoid patrols. Markets operated quietly, supplying both civilians and fighters. Families continued to maintain traditions, cooking meals and celebrating festivals when possible. Commander Zhao insisted that culture and education were vital to survival. Resistance was not solely a military act. It was also a defense of identity, community, and the hope of a future beyond occupation. This holistic approach strengthened the morale of the villagers and reinforced their commitment to the struggle. The Japanese response evolved over time. Patrols became smaller and more cautious. Convoys were stretched out to minimize exposure to mines. Engineers tested soil and probed roads extensively, yet their advances remained slow and costly. Command and coordination were crucial to sustaining these efforts. Militia leaders communicated across villages, sharing intelligence on troop movements, marking dangerous areas, and advising on defensive preparations. Signals and markers were subtle. A rearranged rock, a carved notch, or a pattern in the foliage might indicate an ambush or the presence of a minefield. The Japanese could never fully anticipate these hidden warnings, and every patrol risked encountering sudden destruction. The militia's understanding of both human behavior and geography made them formidable, despite their relative lack of conventional weaponry. Personal sacrifice was constant. Fighters risked capture, maiming, and death. Civilians were exposed to mines or retaliatory attacks. Yet the collective determination outweighed individual fear. Each successful ambush bolstered morale and reinforced the principle that even ordinary villagers, with ingenuity and courage, could inflict significant damage on a powerful occupying force. One ambush in particular demonstrated the lethal integration of mines and guerrilla tactics. A Japanese supply convoy advanced along a narrow gorge, unaware that the militia had meticulously prepared the terrain. Mines were buried beneath loose rocks and along likely vehicle paths. As the convoy entered the gorge, synchronized detonations disabled trucks and sent soldiers scattering. Sharpshooters, positioned in concealed locations above, targeted exposed troops. The Japanese attempted to regroup, but the militia's coordination and terrain knowledge rendered counterattack ineffective. This operation became emblematic of the valley's resistance, methodical, strategic, and devastating. Operations continued relentlessly through changing seasons. Scouts moved at night, laying new mines, observing enemy patterns, and reporting to commanders. Women provided food and medical support, while blacksmiths and carpenters reinforced traps and weapons. Even elders contributed advice on terrain, history, and likely enemy behavior. This collective, intergenerational effort turned every member of the community into a participant in the war effort. Courage, creativity, and collaboration became as critical as rifles and explosives. The psychological toll on the Japanese army mounted. The uncertainty of every step, the fear of hidden mines, and the relentless harassment wore down morale. Soldiers approached every village and valley with caution, probing roads, searching for traps, and moving in slow, deliberate formations. Even experienced officers acknowledged the ingenuity of their opponents. The militia's ability to blend with the environment, combined with strategic mine placement, turned the natural landscape into an ally. The mountains, ridges, and valleys became not merely geography, but instruments of resistance. By the time winter arrived in full force, the militia had established a network of control over the valley. Mines, ambush positions, tunnels, and lookout posts created a complex defensive system that forced the Japanese to rethink their approach. Every road, every ridge, and every bridge presented danger. Yet for the villagers, survival was about more than military success. It was about maintaining life itself, family, culture, and hope in a time of devastation. Through continuous vigilance and adaptation, the militia maintained pressure on the Japanese forces, inflicted casualties, and demonstrated that courage and ingenuity could challenge overwhelming force. Every mine laid, every ambush executed, and every small victory reinforced the valley's resilience. Commander Zhao and his fighters had proven that ordinary villagers, when united by purpose and guided by strategy, could transform their homeland into a fortress. By the spring following the first ambushes in Linhe, the Taihang Valley had become a fortress in disguise. Every trail, every stream, every ridge bore the invisible marks of the villagers' ingenuity. Commander Zhao's militia had grown in both skill and confidence, and the Japanese forces, once arrogant and relentless, now approached with extreme caution. The valley was alive with resistance, a network of mines, ambush points, tunnels, and lookouts that transformed ordinary terrain into a lethal weapon. The Japanese commanders, frustrated by repeated setbacks, intensified their reconnaissance. Scouts moved ahead of convoys, probing roads for traps, while engineers attempted to clear the minefields. But every effort was met with ingenuity. Mines were moved and relaid in unexpected positions. Fake tripwires and decoy paths diverted attention, and ambushes were timed to coincide with the movement of reinforcements. The villagers had become students of the enemy's behavior, predicting movements and exploiting weaknesses with precision that surprised even experienced Japanese officers. One notable operation demonstrated the lethal coordination of mines and guerrilla tactics. A Japanese supply convoy, composed of trucks, motorcycles, and foot soldiers, was advancing along a narrow mountain pass. Scouts had observed the column for days, noting its speed, formation, and timing. Commander Zhao's plan was meticulous. Mines buried beneath loose stones were triggered remotely, while sharpshooters concealed in the cliffs above waited to engage. When the convoy reached the predetermined point, synchronized detonations disabled vehicles, sending soldiers tumbling into rocky gullies. Rifles erupted from hidden positions, and grenades were hurled from above. Within moments, chaos reigned. The Japanese regrouped as best they could, but the ambush had inflicted casualties and disrupted their advance for days. The human cost of these operations was immense on both sides. Japanese soldiers were killed or wounded in numbers that steadily mounted, and each ambush left its mark on their morale. Yet the militia also suffered losses. Misfires, accidental detonations, and the risks of exposure during operations claimed lives. Villagers mourned silently, yet understood that sacrifice was inevitable in the struggle to defend their homes. Even in moments of grief, the determination to resist remained unbroken, forging a resilience that would carry them through the most desperate times. Guerrilla operations were not limited to ambushes along roads. Mines were placed strategically in fields, near bridges, and along the edges of rivers used for transport. Decoys, false trails, and hidden pits were integrated into the landscape, creating a deadly maze for any enemy soldier. Scouts moved silently at night to relay traps, repair tunnels, and relay intelligence. The militia's attention to detail meant that even seasoned Japanese engineers often fell into the traps designed to exploit their predictable procedures. Each mine and ambush was a lesson in the effective use of limited resources against a superior force. The psychological warfare waged by the militia was as effective as the physical destruction. Japanese troops began to fear every step. Even the most cautious officer knew that a miscalculation could result in injury or death. Rumors of invisible mines, sudden ambushes, and sharpshooters in impossible positions spread among the ranks. This constant tension slowed their operations and forced a diversion of manpower into reconnaissance, patrols, and demining efforts. The villagers understood that in war, fear could be as valuable a weapon as any mine or rifle. Amid these operations, individual acts of heroism shone through. Li Mei, the young courier, continued to deliver intelligence across perilous routes, her knowledge of hidden trails allowing the militia to anticipate enemy movements. Chen Wei, the blacksmith, experimented with synchronized detonations, creating chain reactions that amplified the effectiveness of minefields. Other villagers acted as lookouts, medics, and messengers, forming a network of resistance that extended beyond Linhe. Each individual, through courage and skill, contributed to a larger tapestry of defiance against a well-equipped army. The Japanese response evolved slowly, but with increasing caution and brutality. Patrols became smaller, vehicles were separated into single units to reduce risk, and engineers were sent to detect and dismantle traps before the main force advanced. Yet the militia's adaptability neutralized many of these measures. Winter returned, bringing with it snow and ice that transformed the landscape once more. The militia adapted quickly. Frozen streams concealed hidden mines, snow-covered ridges provided perfect concealment for sharpshooters, and icy roads slowed the Japanese convoys into predictable patterns. The guerrilla fighters combined natural obstacles with human-made traps to devastating effect. Even in the harshest weather, the militia maintained operational effectiveness, demonstrating both resilience and resourcefulness that repeatedly frustrated the enemy. One ambush in late December became legendary in local memory. A Japanese regiment attempted to push through a narrow gorge, unaware that the militia had set up a combination of mines, tripwires, and elevated sniper positions. Explosions tore through the column, sending soldiers and vehicles into chaos. Hidden fighters emerged from tunnels to flank the survivors, ensuring that escape was difficult. By the end of the engagement, the Japanese had suffered significant casualties and retreated in disarray. The villagers, though scarred and exhausted, had struck another blow against an army that seemed invincible only months before. The interplay between strategy and terrain was vital. The militia understood the mountains, rivers, and valleys in ways the Japanese never could. Every ambush was carefully chosen, every mine precisely positioned, and every retreat meticulously planned. The defenders exploited natural choke points and high ground, turning each geographical feature into an asset. Even when the Japanese attempted to predict their movements, the militia's knowledge of the terrain gave them a decisive advantage, allowing them to strike swiftly and vanish before counterattack could materialize. The human dimension of these battles was as significant as the tactical achievements. Civilians lived with constant fear, yet also displayed extraordinary courage. Children carried messages, women transported supplies, and elders offered guidance on terrain and enemy behavior. The community as a whole participated in the struggle, making resistance not just a military operation, but a collective act of survival and defiance. Commander Zhao emphasized this integration of society and warfare, understanding that the strength of the militia lay not only in weapons, but in the unity of purpose across generations. The relentless guerrilla campaigns left the Japanese army cautious and demoralized. Their casualties mounted with each failed sweep of the valley. Supply lines were disrupted, and commanders faced the constant challenge of unpredictable ambushes and concealed mines. Even elite units learned to fear the terrain, and reports from northern China during the conflict highlight the significant losses sustained in these regions due to guerrilla mine warfare. By early spring, the militia had expanded their network, integrating neighboring villages into a coordinated system of resistance. Mines, ambushes, and tunnels now extended across ridges and valleys, creating an interlinked defensive network. Scouts observed Japanese movements, relaying information to commanders who coordinated simultaneous attacks across multiple fronts. The Japanese, forced into defensive postures, struggled to regain momentum. Every advance cost lives, resources, and morale, while the villagers strengthened their resolve, knowing that their combined effort could dictate the terms of engagement. Through these sustained operations, the militia learned to adapt continuously. Mines were improved and relocated, ambush tactics refined, and intelligence gathering intensified. Even as casualties mounted and supplies dwindled, the fighters persisted. Their success was not solely measured in enemy losses, but in the continued protection of their homes and the preservation of a community under siege. Commander Zhao's leadership, grounded in patience, observation, and ingenuity, ensured that the valley's defenders remained both effective and resilient, turning ordinary villagers into formidable opponents for one of the most powerful armies in the world. The mountains of Taihang fell silent as spring melted the snow, but the scars of war remained. The village of Linhe and surrounding communities had endured months of relentless conflict, where every trail, every field, and every ridge had been a potential death trap. Yet the valley's people had survived, and their resistance had left an indelible mark on the course of the Japanese campaign. The combination of courage, ingenuity, and intimate knowledge of the terrain had transformed a handful of villagers into a force that the Imperial Japanese Army could not ignore. As the Japanese withdrew from the valley, their losses were measured not only in men and equipment, but in morale. The repeated ambushes, minefields, and unpredictable guerrilla tactics had forced them to slow their operations, divert troops into reconnaissance and engineering tasks, and reconsider their strategies for northern China. What had begun as local acts of survival had grown into a campaign that challenged the assumptions of one of the most disciplined armies in the world. Villagers who had once feared for their lives had become architects of chaos for their oppressors. Life in the valley slowly returned to a semblance of normality, though the echoes of violence lingered in every corner. Families mourned lost sons, daughters, fathers, and mothers. Fields bore the marks of explosions. Homes had been damaged by stray artillery or collapsing tunnels, and abandoned vehicles rusted along the edges of ravaged roads. Yet the community began to rebuild. Farmers returned to their terraces, blacksmiths repaired tools, and children slowly resumed their schooling. Through this labor, the villagers honored those who had fallen and reinforced the bonds of survival that had carried them through the worst of war. The impact of the guerrilla campaign extended beyond the immediate survival of the valley. Neighboring villages, inspired by Linhe's resistance, began adopting similar tactics. Mines were used strategically, ambushes planned meticulously, and tunnels and hidden shelters became common features of northern Chinese villages resisting occupation. Commander Zhao's leadership had created a model of decentralized yet coordinated resistance, demonstrating that ordinary people could use ingenuity and courage to challenge overwhelming force. These tactics slowed the Japanese advance across the region, providing time for broader Chinese military and political efforts to strengthen. Within Linhe itself, the stories of individual bravery became woven into the fabric of memory. Li Mei, the young courier, survived the harsh winter journeys and continued to deliver vital intelligence. Her name became synonymous with courage among her peers, symbolizing the role that even the youngest members of society could play in shaping events. Chen Wei, the blacksmith, was remembered for his inventive mine designs that multiplied the effects of each ambush, proving that intellect and skill could rival brute force. Countless others, women transporting supplies, elders advising on terrain, children acting as messengers, had contributed to a collective effort that became legendary across the region. The use of landmines, while devastating, was central to the militia's strategy and represented a broader theme of the war in northern China: asymmetry. Outmatched in numbers and equipment, the villagers relied on intelligence, creativity, and intimate knowledge of their environment. Mines allowed them to neutralize some of the Japanese army's advantages, turning roads, bridges, and fields into extensions of their will. Historical accounts estimate that thousands of Japanese soldiers were killed or wounded in these operations, though many records understate the full scale of local resistance. The strategy was simple yet effective. Turn the environment into a weapon and let patience and cunning dictate the terms of engagement. The psychological effects of this resistance were profound. Japanese soldiers, who had once advanced with confidence and efficiency, grew wary of every step. Mines, tunnels, and ambush points created a constant sense of insecurity, slowing advances and reducing operational effectiveness. The invisible nature of the threat magnified fear, proving that warfare was not only physical but mental. The villagers had harnessed this intangible element to their advantage, demonstrating that resilience and strategy could triumph over superior firepower. Beyond the battlefield, the legacy of these actions carried social and cultural significance. The militia's resistance reinforced community cohesion, teaching lessons in cooperation, sacrifice, and the value of shared purpose. The militia's resistance reinforced community cohesion, teaching lessons in cooperation, sacrifice, and the value of shared purpose. Even after the immediate danger passed, these lessons shaped the valley's identity. Families remembered the sacrifices made, the ingenuity displayed, and the courage that had allowed survival. Ceremonies were held to honor the dead, stories were passed from elders to children, and the valley itself became a symbol of defiance against tyranny. Commander Zhao's leadership was central to this legacy. His patience, strategic insight, and commitment to protecting both lives and culture guided the militia through countless engagements. He understood that the fight was not only for territory, but for the survival of the community and its traditions. Under his guidance, the militia had evolved from a group of villagers into a disciplined, adaptive force capable of confronting one of the most powerful armies in East Asia. Zhao's example would resonate in the memories of those who survived, inspiring future generations to value courage, ingenuity, and collective effort. The broader historical significance of the Taihang Valley resistance extended beyond local impact. It exemplified the effectiveness of guerrilla warfare against a modern mechanized army and illustrated the strategic value of intelligence, terrain, and psychological pressure. Across northern China, other communities adopted similar tactics, slowing Japanese advances, preserving population centers, and contributing to the overall Chinese war effort. The mines, tunnels, and ambush strategies pioneered in villages like Linhe became part of the larger narrative of resistance, a testament to the power of ordinary people confronted with extraordinary threats. As the years passed, the physical traces of war gradually faded. Mines that had been hidden and forgotten became buried in the earth, while damaged roads and buildings were repaired or replaced. Yet the stories endured. Survivors recounted the nights when silence was shattered by explosions, the clever traps that foiled Japanese patrols, and the moments of courage that turned the tide of battle. It is a story of survival, identity, and human spirit. It is a reminder that even in the shadow of overwhelming force, communities can resist, endure, and leave a legacy that transcends the immediacy of war. The mountains of Taihang, silent witnesses to the courage of the villagers, continue to whisper the lessons of resilience, strategy, and unity, a story that endures as long as the earth itself. The legacy of the Taihang Valley resistance also served as a reminder of the human capacity to adapt and endure. Faced with an enemy vastly superior in arms and numbers, villagers relied on intellect, observation, and creativity to survive. Mines became instruments of strategy, ambushes were executed with precision, and the mountains themselves became allies. Ordinary people were transformed into defenders, their courage shaping events far beyond what their numbers would suggest. The valley's story remains a testament to the enduring power of human ingenuity and resolve. Even decades later, historians and scholars reflect on the impact of these campaigns. The integration of guerrilla tactics, mines, and community coordination provides a case study in asymmetrical warfare. Military analysts note that local knowledge, adaptability, and psychological operations can offset significant technological and numerical disadvantages. The villagers' actions also highlight the importance of collective effort. The Taihang Valley today is peaceful, its terraced fields green and flowing streams restored. Yet beneath the surface lies the memory of resistance, the hidden mines, the tunnels, and the sites of long-ago ambushes. Villagers honor their ancestors through ceremonies, storytelling, and education, ensuring that the courage displayed during the Japanese occupation is not forgotten. The valley itself stands as a living monument to the power of ordinary people to influence history, shaping events through ingenuity, sacrifice, and unwavering determination. In the end, the story of Linhe and the surrounding villages is not only about mines or ambushes, nor merely about victory or loss.